If you enjoy this story, please remember to like and subscribe. The first time I saw a skinwalker, I was 7. At least that's what my father told me it was. A dark shape moving between the juniper trees at the edge of our land. Too tall and thin to be human, too upright to be an animal. It disappeared before I could make sense of what I'd seen. My father gripped my shoulder and whispered, "Never speak of what you see in the shadows. They hear their name when it's spoken." That night, he burned sage in our hogan until the smoke made my eyes water, and my mother drew protective symbols in ash above our doorway. Now, at 12, I understand why. I sit cross-legged on the packed dirt floor of Ahigi's hogan, heat from the fire making the air shimmer between me and the other children. Ahigi's home is like all traditional Navajo homes. A round house made of logs stacked together, with a circular opening at the center of the roof where smoke escapes. The doorway faces east to welcome the morning sun, though now the day is ending, and darkness grows outside. These monthly tribal gatherings are what I live for. Today, we played the shoe game, where 2 teams tried to guess which buried boot held the yucca ball. The older children taught us the string game, weaving stories with quick fingers as they created patterns showing the stars, animals, and mountains. Now, with our stomachs full of roasted lamb, squash, and blue corn, we've gathered for what I've been waiting for all day, Ahigi's stories. My parents say I'm wise beyond my years, always asking questions about our history and traditions. But there's so much I don't know. So much I want to learn about who we are and where we come from. The story of our people has both beauty and sadness. Learning our ways, keeping our traditions alive. This is how we honor those who came before us. The fire pops and sparks float upward through the smoke hole like tiny orange stars. I count 15 of us waiting for Ahigi to begin. The youngest, only 5. The oldest, 19. The smaller children are with our mothers in a nearby hogan, probably already falling asleep as the women talk. Our fathers sit outside around a bonfire, sharing their own stories and laughter. A few adults have joined us inside, sitting at the edges of the circle to hear tales they've likely heard many times before. Ahigi looks around the circle, making sure we're all comfortable. His face has many deep lines, each wrinkle earned through years of living in this harsh, beautiful land. He takes a long drink from his leather water bag, clears his throat, and the excited whispers around me instantly fade to silence. "Tonight," he begins, his voice low and rough, "I'm going to share with you a story of a skinwalker." A chill runs down my spine despite the warmth of the fire. I've heard whispers of skinwalkers my whole life, warnings and protective charms, rules to follow when traveling alone, but never a full story about one. My father speaks of them only in hushed tones, and even then, rarely by name. "These witches are familiar to you," Ahigi continues, "but understanding how they behave will keep you safe. A skinwalker is a magical being that can change its form when it wants to, becoming an animal, or even someone else using its magic. Their purpose is to make us suffer by finding ways to control us and to trick us into making bad decisions. They can be very, very dangerous." I glance at the younger children. A girl of about 6 holds her brother's arm, eyes wide. I feel I should appear brave, though my heart beats faster with every word Ahigi speaks. Many, many moons ago, on the far side of the reservation where the white man calls New Mexico, a teenage girl named Chuli went to a stream to collect water for her family's dinner. Ahigi's voice takes on a rhythmic quality, almost like singing. I can see Chuli in my mind, a girl not much older than some sitting here now, her long black hair catching the sunlight as she walks with her water jug. It was a nice day with few clouds in the sky. She looked forward to the walk, as she was able to see the flowers and plants that dotted the land. Yet it was not just the plants that pleased her. Seeing the animals also made these trips more enjoyable. The beautiful hawks in the sky, the quick rabbits darting through the fields, and even the slithering snakes and fast lizards were all delightful to her. I felt this same joy on my own walks through the reservation, the simple pleasure of being part of this living landscape. I've watched eagles soar above the mesas and followed lizard tracks across warm sandstone. It makes Chuli feel real to me, like someone I might know. What she didn't know as she neared the familiar stream, Ahigi's voice drops lower, forcing us to lean in, was that there was an angry skinwalker waiting for its next victim. My stomach tightens. I wrap my arms around my knees, drawing them closer to my chest. It was angry with Chuli's tribe for using too much of the sparse resources that it also needed to live. Unlike us, this tribe did not have herds of goats or sheep for it to steal. Her village had many good hunters, and they knew how to gather the vegetables and plants so well that none were left for the skinwalker to scavenge. Though a skinwalker can take control of someone's body, this one was unable to lock eyes with any of the villagers so that they would bring it some of the harvest. I've been taught never to look directly into the eyes of unfamiliar animals, especially at dusk or dawn. My mother made me promise. After the night I saw the strange shape moving among the trees. Now I understand why with new clarity. By the time Chuli crossed paths with this skinwalker, it was not only furious that it was not left anything to eat, but it was also extremely hungry. Ahigi gestures with his hands, long fingers spread wide like claws. The fire casts his shadow large against the wall of the hogan, distorting it into something inhuman. I swallow hard. Once Chuli reached the stream, she bent down to collect the water in her jug. As she was finishing, she saw the reflection of a coyote in the water next to her. My thoughts flashed to last week when I saw a coyote watching me from a ridge while I was collecting kindling. I had quickly looked away, remembering my parents' warnings. Had it been just a coyote or something more? The memory makes my skin prickle. She knew they could be dangerous, especially if they had some disease that would make them aggressive. So she slowly looked at it to see what it wanted. At first, she glanced at its body to see what condition it was in and noticed that it was very skinny. Feeling sorry for it, she forgot that she should not lock eyes with any beast without being sure that it is not a skinwalker in disguise. Every muscle in my body tenses as if getting ready to run. I can picture Chuli's face, her moment of kindness becoming her downfall. The younger children around me are wide-eyed, some holding each other's hands. So, after several seconds of peering into its eyes to show that she meant it no harm, the spell was cast. Chuli was now under the control of the skinwalker who had approached her disguised as a coyote. A small gasp escapes from several of us. This isn't just a warning story anymore. It's becoming really scary. My parents had mentioned skinwalkers, but never like this, never with such specific details. Ahigi's story makes them seem real, lurking just beyond the circle of firelight. Chuli stood up and began to walk back to her village, not aware that she was now under the control of the angry skinwalker that was following her back to her home. It stayed in the form of a coyote and trotted behind her in the field that bordered the path. I imagined Chuli walking stiffly, her eyes empty and unseeing, the coyote sneaking behind her like a shadow. Without thinking, I glanced toward the doorway of the hogan, half expecting to see yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness beyond. Another girl from the village passed by her on the way to the same stream. She noticed the blank look in Chuli's eyes and was surprised she did not greet her as she normally did. She didn't notice the coyote following her, so accepted Chuli acting strange, and continued to the stream. I think of my friends in our village. Would I notice if something was wrong with them? Would they notice if something took control of me? The responsibility feels heavy on my young shoulders. When the possessed girl reached her village, she went to the first hogan and asked the teenage boy who sat outside it if he would teach her how to use his bow and arrows. Since he always liked her very much, he said yes, even though he knew that he might get in trouble for doing so. The story continues to unwind like a thread from a blanket, showing the pattern of the skinwalker's revenge. Chuli, controlled by the creature's will, kills the boy with his own arrows. I picture her screaming silently inside her own mind, trapped and helpless as her hands do the terrible act. When Ahigi describes how the skinwalker released Chuli and how she faced her tribe's judgment, I feel relieved that they understood she wasn't responsible. The council's plan to trap the creature shows the wisdom of our elders, something I've always respected but now appreciate more deeply. As the story reaches its most exciting part, the skinwalker returning to the village at night, the elder prepared with his blessed arrow, I'm leaning forward so far I can feel the heat of the fire on my face. When Ahigi describes the skinwalker's end, turned into nothing but ash and an empty coyote skin, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. This is a true story of a skinwalker, Ahigi concludes, his eyes moving slowly around our circle. For several moments, no one speaks. The only sounds are the crackling of the fire and our quiet breathing. I look at the faces of the other children, wide eyes reflecting firelight, mouths slightly open in awe and fear. Some of the younger ones are shaking. I realize my own hands are tightly clenched in my lap. The story has done what Ahigi intended. We will listen more carefully to our parents' warnings now. We will be more careful when walking alone, more cautious of strange animals, more protective of our tribe. Later, as my father walks me back to our hogan, the stars bright overhead in the vast Arizona sky, I stay close to his side. The darkness between the homes seems deeper tonight, the shadows more alive. Did you learn something from Ahigi's story? He asks quietly. Yes, I reply, my voice steadier than I expect. I learned why we must be careful, why we protect ourselves and each other. He nods, placing his hand on my shoulder. Good. Knowledge is protection. As we reach our hogan, my mother waiting in the doorway, I look back toward Ahigi's dwelling. The last of the children are leaving, their parents guiding them home through the darkness. I see Ahigi standing in his doorway watching us all leave. For a moment, our eyes meet across the distance, and he nods at me, as if seeing something special in me. Perhaps the understanding that his stories are not just for fun, but for survival. That night, as I lie on my sleeping mat, I listen to the sounds of the reservation. Coyotes calling in the distance, the soft murmur of my parents' voices, the wind brushing against our hogan. I know that the world is filled with dangers, both seen and unseen, but I also know that our stories give us the wisdom to face them. This is what it means to be Navajo, to carry the knowledge of our ancestors, to honor their ways, and to pass their stories on so that others may be protected. As sleep finally comes, I make a silent promise to remember every word of Ahigi's tale, so that someday, when I am old and gray like him, I can sit before a circle of wide-eyed children and ensure that our traditions and our people survive.